It was just past 7 a.m. when George Mitchell, 68, shuffled into his modest kitchen in rural Ohio. The birds outside were chirping through the open window, but inside the house, it was still, too still. The kind of stillness that reminded him he'd been living alone for almost 2 years, ever since Mary, his beloved wife of 42 years, passed away in her sleep. The kettle on the stove whistled softly, and the scent of brewing coffee filled the room. George moved slowly, knees creaking like old floorboards beneath him, but there was a comfort in the routine. Coffee. Newspaper. Feed the dog. Except the dog had passed last winter too. As he reached for the sugar jar, it happened. A strange tightness gripped his chest, at first dull, then sharply spreading across his ribcage like wildfire. His left arm tingled. The coffee jar slipped from his hand and shattered on the linoleum floor, sugar scattering like snow. George leaned on the counter, gasping. Cold sweat beaded on his forehead. He tried to call out, but the words caught in his throat. George clutched his chest, his breath shallow, panic rising like a wave. The pain wasn't easing, it was tightening. He staggered toward the hallway, one hand gripping the wall. His vision blurred. And then, in the haze of fear and fading strength, he heard her voice, Mary's voice, clear as if she were beside him. If you ever feel chest pain, George, sit down. Stay calm. Chew that aspirin. We read that article together, remember? Of course. The article. 3 months ago, Mary's best friend Carol had mailed him a clipping titled, How to Survive a Heart Attack Alone, 7 Tips Every Senior Should Know. He remembered grumbling at the time, I don't need this, I'm fit as an ox. But Mary had made him promise. He kept the list on the fridge, more out of love for her than belief he'd ever need it. Now, every second mattered. With trembling hands, he half fell, half crawled into the kitchen. There, pinned by a magnet with their wedding photo, was the list. He scanned it through squinted eyes. 1. Call emergency services if possible. 2. Sit or lie down to reduce strain. 3. Loosen clothing. 4. Take slow, deep breaths. 5. Chew an aspirin, 325 milligrams if available. 6. Stay calm. Panic increases heart strain. 7. Don't lie flat if short of breath, stay propped. George pulled a chair, collapsing into it. He unbuttoned his flannel shirt, fumbled in the drawer for the aspirin bottle, and popped one into his mouth. He chewed, slowly, bitterly. He focused on breathing, though each breath felt like dragging air through fire. He pushed himself toward the landline. His fingers trembled but he managed to dial 911. His voice, raspy, broke as he said, chest, pain. Alone. The operator's calm voice cut through the fear, help is on the way, Mr. Mitchell. Stay with me. He clutched the phone. Not just for the call, but for life. 15 minutes felt like a lifetime. George sat slumped in the chair, chest still aching, every breath a conscious effort. The aspirin seemed to help, maybe a little. His heart still pounded, but the worst of the pain had begun to ebb. The emergency dispatcher stayed on the line, gently guiding him, keeping him awake, keeping him present. Then, a knock. Not the ambulance. It was too soon. George glanced toward the front door, unsure if he was hearing things. The knock came again, firmer this time. He rose shakily, leaning on walls like a sailor lost at sea, and cracked the door open. Standing there was a young man, early 30s, backpack slung over one shoulder, breathing heavy. Sir, are you okay? He asked, eyes wide with concern. I was walking my dog down the street and saw you through the window, looked like you collapsed. George blinked in confusion. I had a heart attack. Called 911. The man nodded quickly. I'm Ethan. I live 4 houses down. EMTs should be close. Can I come in? Help you stay upright? Something in Ethan's voice, gentle, steady, felt like an anchor. George nodded, too weak to protest. Ethan stepped in, grabbed a blanket from the couch, and wrapped it gently around George's shoulders. "You're not alone now," he said softly, placing a steadying hand on George's back. "Keep breathing. You're doing great." In that moment, something shifted in George. For so long, he believed he had no one left, that growing old meant growing invisible. But here was this young stranger, someone he'd never met, who chose to care. Outside, the sound of sirens rose in the distance. Relief washed over George, not just from survival, but from the reminder that kindness, even from a stranger, could breathe life back into weary bones. "Thank you," George whispered, emotion thick in his throat. Ethan smiled. "We look out for each other around here. Always." The ambulance arrived within minutes, its red lights flashing like a heartbeat against the morning sky. EMTs burst through the door, professional and calm, checking vitals, placing oxygen on George's face, lifting him onto the stretcher. Ethan stayed by his side until they loaded him in, gripping his hand once more before stepping back. "You saved him," one paramedic said to Ethan as they secured George. Ethan simply nodded, his voice tight. "He reminded me of my dad." At the hospital, George was stabilized quickly. The heart attack had been serious, but thanks to the aspirin, the controlled breathing, and the quick call, he'd avoided major damage. His doctor, a kind woman named Dr. Ruiz, sat at his bedside later that evening. "Mr. Mitchell," she said warmly, "you're lucky. Most people your age don't survive heart attacks alone. But you did everything right. That list on your fridge? It bought you time. It saved your life." George smiled faintly, tears welling in his eyes. "My wife made me keep it. She passed 2 years ago. But today, it was like she was here." Dar. Ruiz placed a gentle hand on his. "She was, through your memory, through your action. And through the young man who stepped in." When George returned home days later, the silence felt different. Not empty, but peaceful. And then came the knock. Ethan, holding a casserole dish and a folded flyer. "My mom made this. And, well, we're starting a neighborhood wellness group. For seniors, weekly check-ins, health talks, emergency plans." George took the flyer with trembling hands. "You're doing this, for me?" Ethan chuckled. "For all of us. You reminded me how precious life is. No one should face something like that alone." George stepped aside. "Come in. I'll make us some coffee." That day marked a new chapter, not just of recovery, but of community. George wasn't just a man who survived a heart attack.